Hello and welcome to another edition of Nation Building. On our program, we examine the political, social, and spiritual issues in the leadership of the Bahamas. Today's program, we are, not just in today's program, but the rest of this year in 2018, we're taking a detour from what is your customary, heavily political programs, interviewing politicians and political leaders, and that has its place. But we're shifting focus, talking to community leaders, spiritual leaders, and nation builders, people who are transforming the lives of people in our country for better and having a lasting impact. And so today it brings me great pleasure in presenting to you two very, very dynamic guests. I'll introduce them to you right after this break.
Being awarded a free live phone in the Making Age Pays campaign last year was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me. I used my phone to play games, chat with friends over the summer break, and watch YouTube videos. Then I got an idea to start my own balloon business. Being able to use my own phone to start up my balloon business was so important to me. I used my phone to research prices and learn how to do balloon designs that I currently offer to my customers today. The internet speed was so good. Oh my gosh, there was no buffering and the videos were very clear. I am so grateful to Alive for my new phone. Thanks Alive. My name is Cara Snows, owner of the Balloon Princess, and I believe in best.
It's the market for the entire family. Sawyer's Fresh Market. Bahamian owned and operated, Sawyer's is known for the lowest prices on meats, produce, fresh fruits, and vegetables. Check them out on Facebook and the Freeport News to find out all of their weekly specials and their monthly blowout sales. Sawyer's Fresh Market. Your grocery bill just got lower.
Who said you can't get great quality products at an affordable price? If you want the best quality food products at the most affordable prices, you must pick up the Jamaica Bahama brand of fine quality products at your favorite food store. Products like Jamaica Bahama Coconut Water, the most healthy and refreshing drink on the market. Jamaica Bahama Fruit Punch, the only fruit punch in the Bahamas made from real fruit. Jamaica Bahama coconut milk, green pigeon peas with coconut milk, condensed milk, kidney beans with coconut milk, corned beef, green pigeon peas, mackerel, and corn. Jamaica Bahama's fine line of products is available at all your favorite food stores and convenience stores nationwide. Telephone 351-8282 in Freeport and 341-4091 in Nassau.
I don't wanna win. No, I don't wanna win.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Hi, would you like to try our chunk noodles?
I only come in here for 2 items.
Okay, but it'll only take 1 second and it's so delicious. Just 1 second.
Yeah, everything tastes delicious. Wow, it's really good. Where do I find it in the store?
Right this way, let me show you. Okay. And
I'm glad to see him. Do the shuffle. It's been a while, do the shuffle.
I can't do the shuffle, man.
You know what? You need this.
What's that?
Junkanoo Juice Medley.
That's it, give me more.
Come on, Jamaica Bahama Imports. Always got it.
come on down and get your Junkanoo juice today.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and today we are having a very, very sober conversation about the future of our country, the Bahamas. And I take great pleasure in bringing you, presenting to you two dynamic spiritual leaders Pastor DenzilRolle is the presiding bishop of Highway Church of God. He's also a well-known recording artist over the years, over the decades in our country. An entrepreneur. He's the owner-operator of Glory FM, which is 93.9 on your FM dial in Nassau. And so, of course, I encourage you to tune into that to get some wholesome spiritual upliftment when you are moving about in the city. And, of course, we have with us, who is now a staple on our nation building programs, Pastor DaveBurrows, who is the president of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, who have had decades of impacting young and not so young people in our country. Gentlemen, welcome to our program, Nation Building.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here, man. Honored to be here.
Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm honored to have both of you here. For you, it's your first time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we will talk a lot today about issues that people care about.
Sure.
I have said this before, I'll say it again. In moving about, I listen keenly daily to people as they meet me, talk about the program and things we're doing, and they also tell me a lot of what we're not doing. And so one of the reasons why we shifted so heavily from talking to politicians is because the citizens said repeatedly, we want to hear from more people who are making a great impact. And I take that to understand that they're not so impressed with their politicians. And that's not a stroke against the current set of leaders that we have, but I think a lot of people in the country have gotten wary of political leaders not being able to solve the problems. I don't say, and if you don't share my view, please feel free. I wouldn't say that our political leaders are not, don't have a desire to do what is right. I think that more often those who are involved in the political leadership of our country just don't know what to do, don't have the answers, and quite honestly, my interaction with too many of them, which I do, they don't listen very well. What say you both, gentlemen?
Well, I think being a politician is a very difficult job, period. And many times it's easy to get elected, but when you are in the position of governance, then you find out what some of the challenges and difficulties are. And so I think we need to have all perspectives. We need to speak to politicians because they are in a very critical position, but we shouldn't limit the national conversation to politicians because there are people who influence the community from all aspects of life. And when you look at what we call spiritual or Christian leaders, I accept the title of Christian leader, but it's a very limiting title for me because I'm a social expert, I'm an economic expert, I'm a leadership expert, period, regardless of whether it's in the Christian arena or outside. And so I think it's important to have conversations with people who are in leadership positions who can positively influence the national life, period, across the board. But with regards specifically to politicians, I think it's a good idea to diversify who we talk to, because sometimes the airwaves are dominated by politicians and political perspectives, and some ordinary citizens, some people who are doing important work, their voices are not heard.
Yeah, I think to add to that, you talked about the challenge with being so governed by the political leaders. I think the challenge is that they're most times myopic. They see in the U.S., they see in 4-year cycles. In the Bahamas, they see in 5-year cycles. And so most of the things that they intend to do, it must happen in this 5-year window. And the whole idea is that I need to be reelected. I have to be reelected. So I work in this window here. And so while I hear a good idea from Pastor Dave and a good idea from Pinnock and from Roll, I ain't sure how this can work in this 5-year cycle. And so I think that is one of the limiting things. I mean, we know where there's no vision, people perish. And if this vision is limited to you, then one of the things we know in the kingdom, that's not from God. Vision must go beyond you. When God gives vision, it's transgenerational. It's beyond what you can see in front of you. It goes into generations, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When we have this 5-year cycle thinking, then we're limited in creativity, we're limited in productivity, we're limited in ideas, really, because everything is subjugated to this little window. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Part of my background is as a planner, as an engineer and a planner. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to think nothing less than 20-year cycles. Nothing less than that, sometimes 30-year and 40-year cycles. And we talk about storms as engineers, we look at 200-year cycles. And so because of that, there's a way of thinking that is in direct opposition to how your typical career politician would think.
Yeah.
And we have been, I don't want to say cursed, but we have been in a situation where we have been recreating more and more career politicians.
And I think one thing that you have to realize about politicians, and I'm not casting aspersions on politicians, this is just the truth. It is very difficult for a politician to tell the truth.
But we have, Pastor Dave, we have, I can't tell you, we have a lot of politicians today that are pastors or assistant pastors. So be careful now.
No, let me tell you what. Let me tell you why I said that. Let me tell you why I said that. And I'm not talking about. I'm not necessarily talking about a politician being dishonest. When I say it's very difficult for a politician to tell the truth, it's because of the election process. Mm-hmm. If I tell you how to really solve your problem, you may not elect me. And that's what a politician faces. So let's say, for example, we are facing a budgetary and a fiscal challenge. And the solution is we need to get rid of some people in the public service. If I am a politician and I'm campaigning and I get up on the stage and I said, you know, we're going to solve this problem and we are going to have to reduce the public service. We are going to have to send some people home. Are you going to get elected?
You can.
You can.
It's difficult, but you can. Here's the reason I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
We don't elect people in the Bahamas, do we, Pastor Dave? We elect political parties.
Right.
That's true.
And so if the political party that is in office is doing a poor job or perceived to be doing a poor job, it doesn't matter what you say on the campaign trail.
Right.
But as a generality.
But no, your point is taken. I simply wanted to tie in and to make this point. I'm coming back at you with another pointed question. Isn't there, and you made a great point about the fact that, but both of you, about not thinking in such limited cycle and all these other things you get to. But isn't there a root problem, though? We, the people, elect the people that serve us. Mm-hmm. If we don't elect individuals based on their honesty, their abilities, or anything else, and the overriding and the overarching factor in our decision to choose is the political label and the banner, then it seems to me, in the case of the Bahamas, we've had the PLP and the FNM, and experts say it'll stay that way until forever. Mm-hmm. So if all we do is go to the polls every 5-year cycle and vote against, not for, some say, against a party we no longer want, then it seems that all the opposition side at that time has to do is just get a bunch of misfits. Anybody will do. And then you are asking them now to be honest, to fix problems, to think not in 20-year cycles.
Right.
In fact, I remember distinctly we had a running joke in the way back in the 2002 general election. A young group of us, Cassius Stewart, myself, and many others from different political organizations, said after that election you had the homeless, the jobless. I mean, you have every less elected, because literally there were people who didn't have a job, who didn't have some place to live. They were just fortunate to be on whatever that political side was at the time, and people wanted to change. And we have had 4 elections and 4 different changes since. So speak to the nation, as if you will, from a spiritual point of view and a national point of view, as to how we really, before we get deep into our concern, how do we get the root problem solved, which is I am putting to you, put in the right people.
Well, we are victims of our political system. You will never get another outcome as long as we have the Westminster system in place. So unless the population significantly changes in their allegiances and people become totally independent thinkers. But because of the way the Westminster system is structured, it limits the ability of individuals to stand out. Because you know, when the prime minister has almost ultimate authority, and the party has authority over you to the point where it's very difficult for you to remain in the party and think even slightly differently from the party, that creates a situation that is untenable and it's very difficult to solve. So in many ways, we have to live with what we have unless we decide to change it or unless the people change. So if the people in the Bahamas, if they get to a point where they say, you know what, we've been electing parties and we've been voting out this one and next one and we've been recycling the same results, so to speak. This time around, we're gonna look for some people and we're gonna make these individuals the ones who we want to elect. And so you have a plethora of independent candidates who are running and people decide we're gonna vote for this person. Until that happens, we continue to be victims of the system.
Some say we had that, but you're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and right back after these messages.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Hi, would you like to try our chunk?
I only come in here for 2 items.
Okay, but it'll only take 1 second and it's so delicious. Just 1 second.
Yeah, everything tastes delicious. Wow, it's really good. Where do I find it in the store?
Right this way, let me show you. Okay. And you stop talking about it. Right.
Glad to see you. Do the shuffle. It's been a while, do the shuffle.
I can't do shuffle, man.
You know what? You need this.
What's that?
Junkanoo Juice Medley.
That's it. Give me some more.
Come on, Jamaica Bahama Imports. Always got it.
Come on down and get your Junkanoo juice today.
It's the market for the entire family. Sawyer's Fresh Market. Bahamian owned and operated, Sawyer's is known for the lowest prices on meats, produce, fresh fruits, and vegetables. Check them out on Facebook and the Freeport News to find out all of their weekly specials and their monthly blowout sales. Sawyer's Fresh Market. Your grocery bill just got lower.
I've been a customer for the past 2 years, and I will say the quality of the service is very good. During my trip to Andros, I was connected the entire trip, so that was really good. I was able to contact my family members and let them know how the trip was going. We touched land, we're here, so it was very good, and I really appreciate that. And also during times like when we had the storm, it was really good to have that service to reach out to our loved ones to make sure everyone is okay. And I really appreciate Alive for that. And even when there's a little technical difficulty, they always send out a little text message to let us know exactly what's going on. I'm happy to be alive, and I believe in best.
Hello, I'm Wendell Jones, and every time I sit down and I watch JCN television, I drink the Jamaica Bahama fruit juice. It's so pleasing to the palate.
I've been cooking Bahamian dishes for generations. I now use Jamaica Bahama product. The rice is very fluffy, very tasty, and good eating. Jamaica Bahama product is simply the best.
As an insurance agent, my life is go, go, go. But whenever I need a refreshing break, it's Jamaica Bahamas Island Mixed Fruit Drink. Good.
Hi, I'm Debbie Bartlett from GEMS 105.9 FM. The effect that Island Junkanoo Juice Medley has on me is exhilarating.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and I'm here today having a discussion about the future of the Bahamas. And we're talking to two spiritual leaders well known in our country, Pastor Bishop DenzilRolle and Pastor DaveBurrows, Dr. DaveBurrows, who is the president of Bahamas Faith
Senior pastor.
The senior pastor and president of Bahamas Faith Ministry International. Thanks for correcting me. Gents, Pastor Dave was making the point about the Westminster system, and I take it that he is not a proponent of that system. He sees the defects of it.
Yeah.
I myself, I've been openly critical. I find the system to be really evil, if you ask me, because no system that is supposed to be democratic can truly be democratic without giving choices. And so before I let you in and say my piece, you in my own world, you cannot have a truly democratic system being practiced when we have a one-size-fits-all. You elect, you go to the poll and cast a vote, you get a member of parliament, you get a senator, you get a prime minister, you get every appointment that exists in the country.
Yeah.
I would at least love to see, Pastor Dave and Bishop Rolle, at least a separation of the what we call a republic-style system or something similar to that, where there is a separation of the office of prime minister or president, whatever you want to call it, from the individual members. And what citizens don't realize is, and I've studied this, a great contradiction when you have a member of parliament who fundamentally works as a representative of the people so that the voice of the people can be heard, is now appointed as a minister. And now his boss is the prime minister, and his loyalty to the cabinet to which he's a part under this system disallows him from being your representative any longer.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think the hypocrisy of it is just so loud. It's so
Why
blatant.
can't our people see that?
And I want to just kind of and I don't want to say it is what it is, but it really is until we have that shift. If we do want to go in that direction, I believe that some hybrid of the Republican-like kind of system, kind of thing, I think would be a better fit. I really believe so. But realistically, where are we in that, to seeing that happen? I don't know if that is going to happen in our lifetimes. I hope it does.
Well,
but I don't know if it will.
They've been talking about constitutional reform.
Yeah.
And I think what needs to happen is that we have to examine what works for the Bahamas. So we have to really do an extensive study, look at the American system, the British system, several other systems, and determine what is the best fit for the Bahamas. In many ways, I like elements of the American system because when you vote for a congressman, the congressman has to come present you his vision and you vote for him. When he goes to Congress, if he doesn't represent your interests, he gets voted out regardless of what party he's involved in. I like that system, but of course there are challenges with the American system as well. But I think it's a better fit in a country like ours because you want your parliamentarian or your congressman to be accountable to you and not to the party.
Yeah, but I think what you mentioned, the fact of, and may get in problems for this, that we have some pastoral colleagues now, assistant pastors, a lot of spiritual men are in, and women are in the House of Assembly, are serving in government now. I think this is where the role of the church is so critical because our jobs is to cause there to be a transformation in thinking of persons that sit around these tables, such that if a group of us who are kingdom-led and kingdom-driven and have this kind of really nationalistic way of thinking, and we say around the tables that matter that, no, this doesn't work. If we can get some degree of agreement from us and said, no, Mr. Prime Minister, or whoever is championing this cause, no, this doesn't work. But the unfortunate thing is, what happens more often than not is we will meet in a side room, and Denzel and Pastor Dave, Denzel and Dave, because there's a pastor, there's Denzel and Dave, and we sit down and we agree with this. And then when we get to the floor, I didn't know that Dave got a phone call after we spoke. And that phone call says, I'm going to promise you, I'm going to give you this and that and the other. And so when I get up there and I talk so strong that we're going to do this, and then I'm waiting for my amen.
So
and then I don't get an amen from Dave.
Are you suggesting,
I'm
Bishop
just giving
Rowe,
a hypothetical
that,
situation.
that the church leaders in the country could very well be suffering from that kind of compromise?
Well, I don't want to go that strong and say that. Let me let Pastor Dave out.
Well, I think, I mean, we're all humans, and we're all subject to the same issues. You know, sometimes we kind of pretend that once you have the label of Christian or pastor, that you are not subject to the same issues as everybody else. We're all subject to the same issues. But I think what is important is that in any country, you have to have people at the table who represent the values that you want for the country. Now, in the Bahamas, we are not officially a Christian nation, but the Christian population is actually the largest constituency. So if you have a democratic society and your largest constituency are Christians, you should be prominently represented in national life. And so I have no issue with persons who are pastors or strong believers being in positions of influence, because if you're not at the negotiation table, you become a victim of the negotiations. So we need to be there. However, we also need to recognize that we have to be held accountable just like everybody else, and there's no exemption. You know, when you say that you are a spiritual leader, you've put yourself in a position to be even more accountable than other people. Because you're not only accountable to the nation, you're also accountable to God. So I think that that's important. And I also think it's important to recognize that in every country, it is important to hear things from a spiritual perspective, because the spiritual perspective is in many ways the conscience of the nation. You know, sometimes if we are just driven by economic pursuits, if we don't have a moral compass, it makes it for a very challenging country. So we have to have people at the table. Now, one thing that I would say is that I have a challenge with, and that is somebody who is an active senior pastor of a church running for office. Just simply because the dynamics of it creates a lot of issues. For example, in every congregation, you have persons from
all different
political persuasions. And when you are elected as a member of a party, and you are in front of your congregation every week, and you are talking to them, obviously, for the most part, you're going to express your political
You'll be
bias,
compromised.
and then people will recognize who you are, and it creates
division in the body.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with believers being in positions, or even pastors being in positions, but an active senior pastor of a church, I think that is a challenge.
Point taken. Why do you say, though, that the Bahamas is not, or suggests that we're not a Christian nation, and when the very preamble identifies the country as being having to be governed in such a manner?
Well, we're not a theocracy. We are a democratic, you know, we operate on a democratic system. To be a Christian nation means that you are actually under the banner of Christian in your governance. We govern independently from the church.
So
the church has influence and input, but if you look at a lot of the policies that are made in the country.
Sure, you're talking about what is practiced, but what I'm asking you is, what do you make of the fact that the founders placed in the preamble the fact that the nation must be governed according to Christian principles?
I think the word in the Constitution is guided by Christian principles. So the founders recognized that these principles are what made them successful and what made other countries successful, and they recommended that we be guided by these principles. And I think in many ways, even though we may not be directly guided by those principles, it's still in the background. And it's not, we are not a Christian nation because we don't make it mandatory that whatever we do must come under the Christian banner. So I think, it's even though we are Christian influence, we are not a Christian nation.
So I think we meaning the church, I think we don't realize the power that was given to us in '73 with that Constitution, when we became an independent nation, and when that clause was put in the preamble. I don't know if we fully appreciate the fact that we were given the right to say, hold on, you're going against what Christian principles are. Definitely, we're not a theocracy. It's definitely we know that our politicians don't sit down with a Bible in front of them and say, hold on, let's check this with the Word of God. Mm-hmm. However, what we do know is that by virtue of the fact that in the preamble there was this door open that says that you are the guys that are going to guide this thing. That gives those of us that represent the body of Christ, those of us spiritual leaders and pastors, that gives us right to hold our politicians and to hold those in governance accountable, to say, hold on, this is in direct contravention to the Word of God. You're not being guided by spiritual principles.
And before we dive into the substance of answers, because that's what you're here for, to share your view about some of the social issues and other issues that are being challenging our country, how do you take that position when many people would say that the church itself, that as spiritual leaders you are divided? You alluded to it just a few minutes ago. How do you first correct that problem so that you're as a church, as a body, leaders, you can be united in terms of what you are presenting to those who govern, so that they can govern the nation according?
It sounds like I'm taking the easy route. But there's a scripture there in Acts chapter 1 where it says that Acts 2 talks about them being on one accord. But Acts 1, I think around about verse 14, he says that they continued in prayer in one accord. I think there's going to have to be a call to prayer of the church. We've been calling the nation to prayer. But I think there needs to be a call to prayer of the church with this focus, though, not just a random call to prayer. We've had a lot of call to prayers. Let's just get together and pray. But I think there's not been the focus of, listen, we need to create unity, an agreement across the board. And let's gather together with that focus. And it's not going to be just prayer, but it's going to begin with that. And we talk about, it's being hurtful, and I've had conversations with Pastor Dave on this prior to a lot of these national discussions, and to see that we as the church have not been able to agree on such fundamental issues, and it then weakened the posture, weakened the position of the church to speak to other more issues that are even more important. And so it's been sad to see it as a younger pastor. It's been sad to see that we don't have that level of agreement.
So, Pastor Dave, to my understanding, you, yourself, and a broad group of pastors are coming together. I believe you may want to share something to the nation on that, to try and bring a united front so that the church can be better represented, at least the views of the church.
Sure. Well, let me say this. Basically, what I've been looking at is that even though we disagree on some specifics, there is a lot of general agreement among Christian leaders, or what you would call kingdom-based leaders. So there's some basic tenets of the Christian faith that are hard to dispute. I think we have to unite around the things that we know that we can unite on. The things where we may differ on philosophically, some people have different thoughts about gambling, they have thoughts about this, that. I think there's no disagreement about what morality is, what decency is.
Even America, with all of its liberal behavior, seems to throw out people when they have moral failings, so you're right.
So I think we have to focus on the things that we are easily united on. Mm-hmm. We have to negotiate on the things where we slightly differ. And we have to, when we come to the table, we have to come to the table about things that we can, when we come to the table collectively, about things that we clearly agree on. The things that we are differ on, there's nothing wrong with different perspectives being shared, but I think we have to focus on the things that are macro issues that we all agree on.
Let me then make a challenge to you, sir, and I will provide the platform for you nationally, to seek to get some of the more renowned leaders in the country, I say this not just for popularity, but because people know them and see persons like yourselves as, you know, authority, together on the issues that there is general agreement on, so that we can have a broad discussion to the nation about the things that the church is united about. And maybe it may be the impetus, the beginning of starting to work together on things that you do agree with, so that it will do the church organization good and the country good to have this united front that you talk about. So whenever you do, I will provide that platform for you. Because people are crying out. People are moving up and down different churches, but across the country, I certainly get the sentiment that the community, the country at large, our citizens, are very, very God-fearing people, and do have a desire, and deep-seated desire, to have Christian values.
The vast majority
the
our
overwhelming
country
majority
is still very much influenced by Christian thought, and even people who don't practice Christian-based beliefs or behavior, they still maintain the beliefs. You know, it's amazing the amount of people that I come across. You know, I've come across drug dealers, I've come across thugs on the street, and they all come to me and they say, and when you listen to them, they know the Bible and they share a biblical perspective. They don't behave that way,
right?
But they do share it. And I think that says that people recognize that what I call the kingdom perspective is a very, very, I mean, when it's a very, very important perspective, but it's the real true perspective from our perspective. There's really no other perspective. But we realize that we live in a democracy and you have people with different beliefs. But here's the deal. Even if somebody doesn't believe in God, you have to believe in the results. And if you look at when people adhere to the principles of the scripture, the results are phenomenal. If you look at the words of Jesus, there's very little that you can argue about. You know, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. He said, be good to those who hate you. All of the things that he said, if we just listen to what he said,
practice them.
Even you don't have to be a Christian or not. If you practice these principles, you're going to be successful. Now, if you become a disciple and if you become a proponent, then it elevates your level of success. But just understanding those principles, I guess that's why the founders of the country said we'll be guided by these principles, because these principles are proven, tested, and tried. We're not talking about people who carry the label and don't practice the principles. But when people carry the label and practice the principles, the results are phenomenal. And I'm a personal testimony of that.
Wonderful. There is so much to get into, and I promise we must do that. And so before we go to a break, let me just quickly look at one of those issues that I was going to make the point as you were in the middle of your statement, that to further your point, during the gaming referendum, which was held, those who practice odd making and looking at numbers and calculating who will win and who will lose, had absolutely counted out the opponents of gaming.
Sure.
And after the results, where the gaming referendum proposal that was put forward was soundly defeated, there was a piece in The Guardian that talked about the fact that the only way that could have had such a significant failure was because of the fact that a majority of those who practice gambling actually voted against.
Right.
I found that interesting.
Yeah. Well, it tells you that as a society, we still believe in observing kingdom principles, and we have collectively concluded in many ways that this is the right way to go, even if we don't practice it. And I think that was.
And some would say that's a big hypocrisy.
It is hypocrisy, but it is an acknowledgement of truth. It's very difficult to live to the standard that we should live at because of the environment. You know, when you look at the world and you look at it from a biblical or kingdom perspective, the Bible tells us that we are in the world but not of the world. It also tells us that the world is against us, meaning the world system. And if we know that we are in a system that opposes godly principles, we shouldn't be surprised that there's a challenge in living out godly principles because the opposition is there. However, we shouldn't be surprised that people recognize that if you live those principles, you'll have a more successful life. And many people are trying, but they are experiencing difficulties. And part of their difficulties is because they are not seeing enough people who are successful in living the principles, even within the church.
And which brings me to the point, Bishop Rolle, isn't the leaders and the church more broadly responsible, at fault, for having such a fertile country of people who acknowledge that there is a God that needs to be worshipped and these things need to be practiced, but as Pastor Dave said, they're not seeing examples of people living it, and they're not encouraged. And we talked earlier about people moving from church to church. So clearly there's something wrong from a leadership point of view in the church.
I think Bible talks about us going from glory to glory. Understanding when Dr. Miles came and he brought the truth of vision, and then he moved to the truth of the kingdom, it was such an eye-opening thing for many of us. Like, wow, that's, you know, I remember sitting down watching him and saying, I need to buy a new Bible. Because like I was reading this thing and never saw it. So I think that we're seeing as we have seen all through time, from Martin Luther to where we are now, that there are constant evolutions of thinking, even with us within the kingdom and understanding spiritual things. And I think there's a rising of greater understanding, and with that we're understanding that this idea of being the salt of the earth. I found out that there's only one way to inoculate salt. The only way to make salt of no impact is to surround salt with salt.
Explain.
Salt, if salt hits anything, it changes its characteristics. You know, if we sit wet in these clothes here today, eventually salt is going to show up. You know, you drive along the seashore, houses along there, you look at the balconies, look at the railings, look at the vehicles, you can see that salt was there. You add salt to food, you see the effect of salt. The only place where salt has no impact is when you put salt among salt.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've been doing in the church. We've been collecting.
So we have containers.
We have containers of salt all over the country. You know, so I think it was 4,000 of them, containers of salt. And we have not been releasing this salt into society. Talking about nation building, we have not been releasing the salt.
And we have containers of defective salt.
and that's another issue. I wanted to just chime in on something Pastor Dave spoke about earlier. I know of persons. I know a person that actually operated a gaming house close to my church, and he came to me and said, he says, Pastor, I did a teaching on it the Sunday before, because I didn't get a leading until then, and I did a teaching on it. And he says, Pastor, I watched the teaching, and I had on my Vote Yes shirt. But if I wanted to know with a Vote Yes shirt on and giving all the guys high fives, I just couldn't do it. And I know of many others like that because of the biblical and Christian foundation that they have, that even though their life is not totally consistent with the foundation, there are certain moorings that they have not loosened from. However, I think there's a danger that we are developing a generation that does not have those kind of foundations.
We're going to get specifically in the last segment into the issues themselves. You're watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. Right back after these messages.
Being awarded a free iPhone in the Making A's Pays campaign last year was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me. I used my phone to play games, chat with friends over the summer break, and watch YouTube videos. Then I got an idea to start my own balloon business. Being able to use my own phone to start up my balloon business was so important to me. I used my phone to research prices and learn how to do balloon designs that I currently offer to my customers today. The internet speed was so good. Oh my gosh, there was no buffering and the videos were very clear. I am so grateful to Alive for my new phone. Thanks Alive. My name is Cara Knowles, owner of the Balloon Princess, and I believe in best.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Hi, Hi, would you like to try our chunk noodles?
I only come in here for 2 items.
Okay, but it'll only take 1 second and it's so delicious. Just 1 second.
Yeah, everything tastes delicious. Wow, it's really good. Where do I find it in the store?
Right this way, let me show you. Okay.
Thank you.
Where's the glad to see you.
Do the shuffle.
It's been a while, do the shuffle.
I can't do shuffle, man.
You know what? You need this.
What's that?
Junkanoo juice medley.
That's it. Give me some more.
Come on,
Jamaica Bahama Imports. Always got it.
Come on down and get your Junkanoo juice today.
Who said you can't get great quality products at an affordable price? If you want the best quality food products at the most affordable prices, you must pick up the Jamaica Bahama brand of fine quality products at your favorite food store. Products like Jamaica Bahama Coconut Water, the most healthy and refreshing drink on the market. Jamaica Bahama Fruit Punch, the only fruit punch in the Bahamas made from real fruit. Jamaica Bahama coconut milk, green pigeon peas with coconut milk, condensed milk, kidney beans with coconut milk, corned beef, green pigeon peas, mackerel, and corn. Jamaica Bahama's fine line of products is available at all your favorite food stores and convenience stores nationwide. Telephone 351-8282 in Freeport and 341-4091 in Nassau.
I don't wanna win. No, no, I don't wanna win.
Welcome back to Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock, and today we are having a very fruitful and substantive discussion with the nation. We have two spiritual leaders here, Pastor Bishop DenzilRolle and Dr. Pastor DaveBurrows, who's a senior pastor and president of Bahamas Faith Ministries International. Gentlemen, in this final segment, let's hit on some of the real current issues that people are struggling with. We have any number of issues, from increasing taxes to, of course, the gaming issue has been gone for a while now, but we've had this issue too, which I think has some moral value to it, or to look at, which is some argue that government is taxing one industry, which is the gaming industry, not taxing other sectors. One group in Life at Key asked, push back on proposed taxes, and the government back down. They don't. Some think it's a matter of race, and you have those issues. You have the other social issues. Let's address a few of these things that are pressing. Taxes, for example.
Okay,
where do you stand?
When it comes to taxes, I think, in particular, when we talk about VAT, we have to look at, is this absolutely necessary? And also, will the implementation of VAT achieve the desired goals? Will it solve the problem? If we implement a tax that's not absolutely necessary and does not solve the issue, then we've complicated our economic conundrum. So I think that those are the things that we have to look at. Now, I had the opportunity of sitting with the Deputy Prime Minister and him outlining the case for VAT. I also had several meetings with prominent persons, in a number of fields who had knowledge, who had an extensive knowledge base about these issues. And after listening to everything, it appears that in many respects, this government had very little alternatives, and that what they did was actually courageous in attempting to solve the problem. Now, if this is the correct path, I am not sure. Is there an alternative path? I haven't heard it. But in talking to the experts that I talked to, nobody likes this path, but it was the most easily achievable. If it achieves the goal, then it would be commendable.
Those who put it forward would be heroes.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't,
yeah, then it would just add to our burden.
Yeah.
But I think in the process of the discussion, one of the things that the Deputy Prime Minister pointed out is that successive administrations have, just as many countries around the world have done, is to kick the ball down the road, don't address the issue. But we were approaching, or we are approaching, a point where you're looking at possible currency devaluation, you're looking at debt to GDP,
debt to GDP ratio
right,
being
ratio issues, and you're looking at the possibility of unsustainable payments for debt.
right.
And that would really cripple the country. So,
Quick question then, and then still on the
I
moral
want to
front,
speak on
I
that.
believe. What, though, do you say to those citizens who say, look, whatever the issues of the country are, and we'll face dealing with them, you were in Parliament, you knew generally the state of our economy, and you said we shouldn't have had taxes in the first place. How do you talk to those people who pushed back radically and said, this is hypocrisy? You told us that we shouldn't have any taxes in the first place. Now you're increasing what we have.
I think Pastor Dave answered that in the first question.
Okay.
That, that it's hard for them to tell the truth. That it's hard for politicians to tell the truth. We have to say what needs to be said in this moment, for this moment, and then we'll deal with the ramifications afterward. But to the question of the taxation element, I think that point you made is just politicians. It's what happens. That's the reality that we have to face. It's a sad reality, but the politicians say what needs to be said to be elected. But I think back to the whole idea of taxation. Taxation, what is dangerous is that taxation, number one, cannot replace innovation. You have to be very careful with that we don't silence our innovative energies and creative energies and replace it with this band-aid called taxation. And then I think further to that, I had a friend of mine when we would go to the gas station and he would say, check the gas and fill it up with oil, because his car was just constantly leaking oil. And it stayed like this for weeks and weeks and weeks until the car just totally shut down and everything shut down in the vehicle. And we can take the approach of constantly filling this car up, but if we don't plug the hole, and I think that's one of my challenges with the increased taxation. Are we plugging the holes?
See, I think the other thing too is because I listened carefully to the conversation, the meeting that I was in with the Deputy Prime Minister, and he said something that was kind of telling. We can change if we innovate, do things differently, and so on. But the problem is, do we have the time? Do we have the historical record of these things happening? If we don't, then we have to look at what are the immediate measures, practical measures that can be taken. And so I think that's the approach that the government took. And in addition to that, in the meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister, he said that once they got into power and examined what had happened in the past, he mentioned some things. I don't know the veracity of it or not, but he said, for example, he said the true debt of the country was disguised. So he said that instead of multiple departments reporting their true position, they would roll it over until the next cycle. So the true debt position of the country is not reported. So I think all of those are factors. But, I think if somebody has an alternative, I commend the government for being courageous in trying to address it, because I think successive governments on both sides in the past have done what most governments do. They postpone it till the next election cycle. So at least this government has tried to address it. Now we have to determine whether this is the correct methodology.
What, for both of you, sensitive of time, what do you think is one of the most telling issues in your mind that you need to talk to the nation about, that has the crossing of a spiritual and political divide that people need to want to be informed about, for both of you?
Well, when we're talking about current issues, one of the things that's been debated lately is the whole issue of marijuana. And I think whenever issues like this come up, we have to get a balanced perspective, and we have to ask difficult questions. and we have to hear both from a spiritual, practical perspective. What I did when I heard the topic come up is I said, you know, we need to ask some specific questions. First of all, for example, when we're talking about legalization or decriminalization of marijuana, does it benefit our country and our people? Secondly, will it lead to better citizens who are more educated, who are able to perform better professionally? Will it result in an improved society or harm society? That's where all debates should begin. Now, because I happen to be an expert in marijuana, I studied both marijuanaology at the University of Warren Street and also at the Harlem Institute of Thuggery. So,
you have practical experience.
I have a lot of information on it.
I will be silent on this topic.
I have a lot of information on it. But what I did was I researched one current example of this issue. And so I went and I researched the Colorado example. So Colorado is one of the states that recently legalized marijuana. So the first question that I asked from their experience was, did it result in increased levels of intoxication? And the answer is as follows. It says that once it was introduced, Colorado youth, so now marijuana is legal for everybody over 21, but once it was introduced.
And that's recreational, to be clear.
Yeah, once it was introduced, Colorado youth now ranked #1 in the nation for marijuana use, 74% higher than the national average. Colorado college age group now ranked #1 in marijuana use, 62% higher than the national average. Colorado adults now ranked #1 in the nation for marijuana use, 104% higher than the national average. So it says that it is supposed to affect people who are over 21, but it's actually affecting teenagers. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question was, will it have a negative impact on mental health? And again, going to the Colorado issue, it says the increase in incidence of marijuana in impaired traffic citations rose from 12% to 20%. And marijuana-related traffic deaths increased by 48%. Over 20% of all traffic deaths were marijuana-related compared to 10% 6 years ago. So,
all the studies seem to suggest that it hasn't had a negative impact.
Well, I want to give proper balance. I'm going to go through each one of these because
we're running out of time. Just to be sure.
Okay, well, we'll just end on this point, and then
we'll have to continue this discussion. I want to give you 30 seconds to close because we're practically out of time.
Okay, right.
But we will. I promise you, we will further. There's a lot that we didn't get to cover.
I think for me, one of the most, and it speaks to that as well, is the absenteeism that we see relative to fathers. I do school outreach, and I know Dave did this, Pastor Dave did it all of his life, going to schools and you talk to the students, you ask them, how many of you go to a church? And I remember I went to a class at Aaron Bailey about a few years ago, and there were about 40 children, and about 3 raised their hand. How many of you have fathers in the home? About 5 or 6 raised their hand.
And the class of how many?
About 40.
Wow.
That reality is what is striking and is like almost paralyzing to the mind to know what is actually happening. And so I think and we can point to all of the social ills, but they begin right there. And as we look for, I'm a father of a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm looking forward, and like I said, it's paralyzing. Like, this is the reality. What is this Bahamas going to look like for my children down the road?
And as we close, may I challenge both of you respectfully? The outreach to men seems to be the solution.
Absolutely.
Moving forward. You agree?
Yeah, well, I think our country and our world functions better when we follow the kingdom model of family. And the breakdown of the Bahamas is in direct correlation to breakdown of the kingdom model of family. And so I think we have to focus on restoring that model, and the foundation of that model is the male man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Folks, as you could see, we've gone completely over time, but this is good information. We're going to have these gentlemen and other spiritual leaders back to talk more about solutions to our social issues. You've been watching Nation Building. I'm your host, Winston Pinnock. It's been a pleasure to bring this broadcast to you. On behalf of all of us here at Nation Building, I want to thank you for tuning in, and we promise that the next edition will be just as informative, educational. Stay tuned and have a great week, as always.